Going inside the issues of our community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. For years, Americans took voting for granted. The recurring question seemed to be, my one vote doesn't make a difference, does it? But ever since the 2000 presidential election, the value of every vote has skyrocketed. If you have any doubt, think about the slim 29-vote margin that separates the more than 26,000 people who voted in the Lakota School District last Tuesday. And in any jurisdiction that uses punch card systems, the question has become, did they count my vote? Over the past 4 years, state and local elections officials have explored a variety of alternative technologies. Electronic touchscreen systems, already in use in many places like Kentucky, initially seemed attractive because they prevent double voting. Critics, however, have raised questions about vote tampering and the lack of a paper trail. Last Wednesday, Secretary of State Ken Blackwell announced that all Ohio counties must choose precinct count optical scan devices to allow more citizens to vote in an expedited manner while providing accurate, dependable, and paper audible results. Blackwell not only narrowed the choice to optical scan technology, but to two vendors. The first is Diebold Election Systems AccuVote, which costs $4,572 a unit, or the Elections System and Software Model 100, which is priced at $5,499 per unit. To discuss the implications of this pronouncement, I am joined this morning by John Williams, the Director of Elections for the Hamilton County Board of Elections. Mr. Williams is an attorney who was with the prosecutor's office before joining the Board of Elections. He assumed his office about a year and a half ago. John, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thanks, Dan.
Did you realize that this debate and there was a potential decision to be made to opt for optical scan? Did you realize that the Secretary of State's office was in the process of making that decision?
We did not. We had been moving forward on another program with another electronic machine. We had many contacts with the company, done a gap analysis to reorganize our business. And unfortunately, I went on vacation on January 12th. The Secretary of State promulgated the rule, sent the directive down to Hamilton County, and it's quite surprising, to put it mildly.
In the Secretary of State's statement, one of the things that is a theme there is that the optical scan system will be less expensive. And you brought along, by the way, a ballot, an optical scan ballot. And this is a paper ballot. Looks very simple. It's one of these things that you sort of fill in the little ovals like
Correct.
We've done on test. One of his arguments is this is inexpensive. Is that a good argument in this case?
Well, initially, the expense of an optical scan system is cheaper to implement or to purchase. However, there are some long-range implications that are very difficult for some of the counties in Ohio to swallow. Each ballot, and the particular ballot you held up there, could cost anywhere from, we've heard, a quarter to over $1, and that's per ballot. Now you consider that Hamilton County had 573,000 registered voters in this last election. You need a percent or two more ballots than that, plus
Right.
you have perhaps new languages coming into Hamilton County in the next census. It gets quite expensive on the printing costs.
Why is it so costly? What is it that makes this? It looks like a straightforward piece of paper, one color ink. What's the big deal?
Well, the big deal is that in reading an optical scan ballot, you need tremendous precision. And you'll see the black marks to my right. Those are called timing marks. The timing marks are codes to indicate where certain things are laid out on the ballot. So the machine reads that, and it can tell where ballots are appropriately placed. But that's a very, very technical type of printing.
And therefore expensive.
Very expensive.
So, and I think people, increasingly, absentee voting is becoming a major deal.
Absolutely.
And that means you have to have ballots printed up ahead of time.
Correct.
And people think, oh, gee, in Hamilton County, well, there's a ballot. but there's not. There's ballots, lots of different ballots, right?
That's correct, and this is all mandated by Ohio law. In this last election, we had 72, in absentee voting, we had 72 ballot styles. These are individual forms of the ballot, okay, with candidates and issues and so forth. Within those 72 ballot styles, we have what are called rotations. And a rotation is the movement of a candidate through the ballot from the top position to a lower position. The reason you have to do that is if one candidate has the top position all the way through the ballot, that person statistically would get more votes. So it's unfair to the other candidates. So in absentee voting in Hamilton County, we had 10 rotations. In our absentee distribution, we put out 720 different type ballots to the voters around Hamilton County. Before I arrived at the board, people say, well, you work one day a year on election day or 2 days a year, whenever election day occurs. People told me that I would have no idea what goes on into putting on an election, and that's absolutely true. It's incredible.
So the point is, you would have to, before an election, predict how many absentee requests you might get for these various different kinds of ballots so that you could fulfill those needs. So you're going to have some waste built into that too.
Well, yes, it's a very, very, it's not an efficient system.
Okay.
We would have to predict where the hot issues are going to be in that election. So you may have, if you have 50,000 absentee requests, you may have to print 100,000, 250,000 ballots to match your absentees. So it's difficult.
So the point here is cheaper to buy the initial system, but very expensive to operate in the long term.
Right.
And what's the lifespan of a system?
Well, the other card that you have down there is our old standby punch card ballot
That we've all come to
know and love
or hate.
and hate. This ballot came into being in Hamilton County in 1974, so it's 30 years old.
Okay.
So
This
really,
is a long-term investment.
absolutely, and that's been it's maligned in some areas, but it's been really served this community well, except for some instances.
What system have you been pursuing?
The other system right here, Dan, is this is a company called Hart Intercivic, Texas-based company. They have a system called the eSlate, and that's what you're holding in your hand. This system is an electronic voting system, and it is not a touchscreen. We did not want to have a touchscreen in Hamilton County because there are problems inherent in some touchscreen with calibration.
Okay.
Basically, there's a select wheel. There's a button you push to select your choice. Now, the cursor, as you can see, highlights the selection. The interesting thing is, everybody in this community has probably turned on a wash machine. You use a dial to turn your wash machine and you press a button for the type of load that you're going to wash, okay? So obviously people would look at that and have some fear of technology. But we thought when you looked at it from a standpoint of you do these household tasks every day, that it's really quite simple. It's efficient, and it does have a paper trail. So people that are concerned about paper trails, they're satisfied.
Well, that's what I would question. This does have a paper trail?
Absolutely.
So you will be able to go back and check if there's any question after the fact. You could do a hand count?
Absolutely. And that's mandated by Ohio law. Any electronic machine that comes into being in this state has to have a paper trail.
What about the concern about being able to tamper with these things and the computer side of these things? So I think I'm voting for so-and-so, Sean Casey, for president. Oh, I guess we're moving him from the baseball team to, now that I see who's on here. I vote for Sean Casey for president, but really it's recorded as Adam Dunn for president.
Well,
how do I know the right person?
This system is the only system on the market with 100% positional accuracy. I heard some stories that around the country where people say they pressed one button and another candidate came up. This system, because it is not a touchscreen, it is a dial and a punch, has 100% positional accuracy. It's the only one on the market that can say that. In addition to that, you have that cursor that comes through. All of the machines also have audit features, okay? And so we have auditing, proofing, all of these things go into putting on an election that are unseen by the public. We have a bipartisan system in Ohio with Democrats and Republicans working on the programming and the rolling out.
How far down the road were you on studying this, pricing it, and getting close to making a decision to purchase this?
Well, we believe those decisions have already been made.
You think you've already committed to this?
Well, in Ohio, back in April, there was a vote. Secretary of State entered into the decision, and at that time we wanted more time to study some other systems also.
Right.
We were again under a deadline. We committed to this company. We have had tremendous interaction with this company to train our staff to go to what are called users groups meetings, where we go with other customers to try to find out any new points to the system.
So
We've
it's
also-
not just that you've looked at this, you've actually spent some time, sort of the past year, actually working with this and getting ready to implement it?
Absolutely, and our people have been trained. Our programming people have been and are in the process of being trained. There's something also called a gap analysis. As you can imagine, there's a tremendous difference between a punch card and an electronic voting device.
Mm-hmm.
That requires reorganization by our board. We have engaged in what is called a gap analysis to say, hey, you guys need to change this or you need to reorganize here. This company has helped us with that.
What about the cost of this?
It's about $3,000 per machine.
Wait a minute, that's cheaper than either of the optical scan machines.
Well, it's cheaper, but you'll need many of these out in the field. An optical scan machine, you'll take your ballot, you'll go to the voting booths that we currently have in the county, you know, the punch card machines, we're going to still have to hold on to those.
All right.
You'll go over, you'll mark your ballot, and then you'll feed it into a scanner. So you need one scanner per precinct.
Okay, so there are some differences.
Yes.
Bottom line, which is more expensive to purchase?
The electronic machine has the more expensive initial purchase, is a lower ongoing cost. And that's important because the initial upfront costs on this, the vast majority is going to be borne by the federal government through the Help America Vote Act, okay? So we are concerned with the initial purchase, but the Hamilton County taxpayers and voters should also be concerned about the ongoing expense. And that's where we believe that the DRE, as they call it, is the best low-cost producer.
Is there a difference here? The Secretary of State seemed to be concerned that under HAVA, which was just on the screen, which is the short form of Help America Vote Act, that all Ohioans ought to be using one basic system. Does every county need to use the same system?
The plan that the Secretary of State filed in regard to the Ohio plan with the government, federal government, indicated that Ohio is unique, counties are unique, and there should be some understanding of the uniqueness in the different areas and the different needs of the voter. Metropolitan areas are different perhaps than rural areas. And so whereas in a county that is smaller, perhaps with less people, a paper system is excellent. And a paper system may be excellent in Ohio or Cincinnati and Hamilton County, but we just need to find a way to deliver a ballot at much less expense than we are right now.
One of the things you mentioned before is language. On the electronic system, you could also have loaded into there a Spanish language ballot, for example?
That's correct.
So you could handle the different languages in the same programming process.
Yes. And part of our diligence on this machine is we sent people to California, all over the place. And through our research on this company and other companies, we found these electronic machines can handle 6, 7, 8, 10 different languages, multiple ballot styles.
Is this already in use in California?
Yes.
Okay, so there's
Orange County, California.
So there is field testing on this.
Absolutely. It's in use in Orange County, California, and also Harris County, Texas. It has the largest 2 deployments of an electronic machine in the country.
What is the Hamilton County Board of Elections going to do given what Secretary of State Ken Blackwell has announced this past week?
Well, as you know, Franklin County, Mahoning County, and several other counties in Ohio have sought court protection through a form of a temporary restraining order. Attorney Jim Petro was requested to give an opinion by Franklin County. Attorney General Petro indicated that the Secretary did not have the authority to mandate a change from a HAVA-compliant system that we had earlier selected to a optical scan solution. So at this point, there's a dispute on who has the authority to do what here.
Might Hamilton County join that suit?
You know, that's potential litigation. I would be hesitant to talk about something like that at this point.
Okay. But in your mind, you still want to pursue the electronic system, the HART system?
I think I'm a very, very big proponent of, because we have such a unique opportunity in the election business. I don't know that we've ever had federal money to purchase a machine, We've had punch card for 30 years. I say let's take a step forward. Let's go to the next level. Eventually, I think everybody's going to be using an electronic. Our society goes from less paper, or from more paper right now to less paper. We do things more electronically. It does have a paper backup. It's completely secure. There's no outside electronic entry. You can hack into it. They're the best. It's interesting. They have a moniker that they're the best election company that you've never heard of. And that's a good thing in elections business.
Okay, John, I'm out of time. This has been very enlightening to clarify these three systems, because it was all sort of swimming around in my head.
Right.
Thank you for being here
My
this
pleasure.
morning. We'll see what happens over the next few weeks, few
Thank
months. After the break, an amazing story of courage. Cincinnatians in the Philippines working to save German Jews from the Holocaust. Stay tuned. Welcome back. If you have seen Hotel Rwanda in the theaters right now, you know that terrible atrocities call forth amazing acts of heroism. Over the last few years, the Center for Holocaust and Humanity Education on the campus of Hebrew Union College in Clifton has helped uncover and tell inspiring stories of both survivors and those who helped them. Occasionally, those stories intersect with the lives of ordinary Cincinnatians. That was the case of Cincinnati's Frieder brothers, who operated the cigar factory in the Philippines when 1,200 Jews fleeing Hitler's wrath arrived by boat in Manila Harbor in 1939. The Frieders, with the active support of the Philippine government, helped create a haven. Until published last year by Frank Ephraim, one of the rescued children, the story remained essentially untold. This weekend, that is changing. At the end of the segment, I will let you know how you can participate. I am joined this morning by the daughter of one of the Frieders. Jane Ellis is the daughter of Morris Frieder, and there were 4 brothers, as I understand it, who operated this the cigar company in the Philippines. Is that right?
There were 5 brothers,
5
and 2
brothers.
sisters, but one brother didn't participate in the Philippines.
Okay. As you spent some of your childhood in the Philippines, right?
The brothers rotated out there for a year and a half, 2 years at a time. So when one brother's family went out, another brother's family came home. And that went on from they first went there in 1918, unbelievably. And that went on from 1918 or 19 until the last brother was forced to leave about 2 weeks before Pearl Harbor.
And your father, were you there while he was actively helping some of the...
No, we left in 1937. That was our
Okay.
rotation time, was to leave in 1937, and it was our turn to go back in 1940. But by that time, my mother and dad had 4 children. So they felt that 4 children, so an uncle with no children went. But if one brother or the 2 brothers who were over there taking turns were working over there, the brothers who were here were working just as hard. They worked as a unit.
At that time, did you hear your father or your uncles talking about this work?
A little, not much. Now, my cousin Alice, who was there at the time,
Alice Weston, who is Alex
was there.
Frieder's
Was Alex's?
daughter.
She was there at the time,
Uh-huh.
and she has great recollections of the refugees coming to their house, having their parents made them comfortable. She has a lot of recollections of what was going on at the time.
And from a child's point of view, what did she think was going on back in Germany? What was being said?
I'm not sure. We knew that there were problems because at the same time in 1937, we were supposed to come home via Europe instead of the Pacific. And they had a lovely trip planned for us, and the 3 of us at that time were to stay in Switzerland, and Mother and Dad were supposed to travel a little bit. And then, even then, they felt it was not very smart to leave 3 children in Switzerland while they went around Europe. So we came home the Pacific. They knew things were going on. Mm-hmm. And people had come from Germany, people had brought to the United States. We had a lot of friends who, or my parents did, who brought refugees over here, but not to the extent that they did there.
You know, this boatload of refugees shows up in Manila Harbor, and we know that unfortunately other groups of refugees showed up in other harbors and were turned away. This is a story not just of the Frieder family, but it's the story of the Philippine government and the Philippine people as well. Is that right?
Manuel Quezon, the president of the Philippines at the time, was very instrumental in opening the doors to. I mean, without President Quezon, it never could have happened. He felt, as a devout Catholic, which all of the Philippines was, he just felt that this was something to do. And without him, it couldn't have been done. Without Paul McNutt, who was the High Commissioner, it couldn't have been done.
The U.S. official. He
was the High Commissioner. The Philippines came to the United States in 1898, right. The Spanish-American War, and at that point they were promised their independence in 1946.
Now, President Quezon's, I guess, grandson is going to be here in Cincinnati?
He is going to be here in Cincinnati. He is coming from Manila. He is a journalist, a very well-respected, well-known journalist. And he is coming, and his cousin who lives in Columbus and another relative, they are coming.
As later in your life, as you got older, the war was over, you were growing up, did your father, did his brothers, was this active conversation in the family? Had you heard this story?
We had heard the story, but it wasn't active conversation. When this was over, they went on with their lives. It was something that needed to be done, and fortunately, they did it. Mm-hmm. And they did something just incredible.
Do you think they thought of themselves as heroes?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Our children don't know anything about this. When this all came out, they said, why didn't we know about this? Why haven't you told us about this? Paul McNutt's nephew didn't know about it. His biographer didn't know about it. It was just something that these men saw a need to do something, and with the wonderful cooperation of the people who helped them, it was done. There was a lot of work in the United States. I mean, there was a lot of trips to Washington, to the Joint Distribution Committee, to the Jewish Refugee Committee, and the people, the brothers who were here, worked very hard.
So this isn't just what happened in the Philippines. This was because this was a company that was based in Cincinnati, based in the United States, was in Manila. They were able to support all of this activity back
and
here.
This was a family. I mean, these 4 or 5 men worked as a unit all their lives. They were in business together. They did this together. They worked as one unit.
As you today look around and hear the stories of Bosnia or Rwanda in the 1990s, what is it that we today ought to be aware of, looking back, grounded in that Holocaust experience? How should we be looking at what's happening around the world? How should we be tuned in?
Well, I think we should all be horrified that people can do such terrible things to each other. What we can do, I as a citizen, I just hope we can do that. This incident, this activity shows that a small group of people can make a difference.
Small group of ordinary people.
A small group of businessmen, can make a difference. And I don't know if you know it, but there were plans underway that were practically complete to resettle 10,000 more on one of the southern islands. Now, that didn't come to be because of world events.
And in the book, we need to say that, of course, the Philippines then gets trapped itself, gets taken over by the Japanese. And for those Jewish refugees trapped in the Philippines, that becomes another really difficult part of the story.
In the beginning, it wasn't difficult because the Japanese considered them Germans, allies, and not Jews. But after a year or two, then they were really horrible to them. And the really terrible part was when the Americans came in. The fight to take over the Philippines was terrible. And most of them, practically all of them, left as soon as the war was over.
Was there any, they left, and we have less than a minute, 30 seconds or so. Was there any personal contact maintained between your family, the extended family, and some of these refugees? Did some of them come to Cincinnati?
Maybe one or two. The first we knew about it was there was a reunion in Washington, which was when we first heard of all of this.
Okay. Let me just remind people what's going to happen this weekend. If you'd like to learn more and participate in the ceremony to honor the Frieder family, the refugees, the Philippine government, and the people, join the celebration on 1:30 this afternoon at Plum Street Temple, 8th and Plum downtown. Tomorrow at noon on Monday at the main branch of the public library, Frank Ephraim will discuss his book, The Escape from Manila, and you can join in that conversation. Thank you for being with us this week. Join us again next week. Have a good week. Jane, thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I hope...